War is a theater of chaos, uncertainty, and human endurance. Yet, even within the organized machinery of armies, there exist mysteries that defy explanation. Among the countless units that marched into battle, few stories are as haunting as those of the disappearing platoons, soldiers who set out on missions, followed orders, and simply vanished without a trace. These were groups whose existence was confirmed one moment and erased the next, leaving behind no clear evidence of what had happened. Their stories are a chilling reminder that in the fog of war, the unknown often outweighs the known, and some secrets remain buried in the earth forever. The phenomenon of disappearing units was not confined to one battle, one region, or one army. Across Europe, Africa, and the Pacific, small groups of soldiers entered enemy territory and were never seen again. These vanishings were sometimes attributed to enemy ambushes, harsh environments, miscommunication, or navigational errors. In other cases, the reasons remained entirely mysterious, leaving historians and families grappling with questions that have no answers. The stories of these platoons combine strategy, human error, heroism, and the inexplicable, and they form one of the most haunting chapters of military history. One of the earliest recorded instances occurred during the winter of 1941 in the forests of Eastern Europe. A reconnaissance platoon of 20 men was tasked with gathering intelligence on advancing enemy forces. Their objective was simple in theory: move quietly through the dense forest, observe troop movements, and report back. They left their base under cover of darkness, their boots muffled by freshly fallen snow, their breath visible in the icy air. At first, all went according to plan. The soldiers moved in formation, using hand signals and subtle cues to avoid detection. They were trained for this environment, skilled in navigation, camouflage, and survival. Yet, by the following morning, no trace of the platoon remained. Searches found no footprints, no campfires, and no signs of struggle. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them. The disappearance sparked immediate concern and intense investigation. Commanders combed the surrounding forests, questioning local villagers, consulting maps, and attempting to piece together what could have happened. Some believed the platoon had been ambushed by enemy forces and taken prisoner. Others speculated that a sudden snowstorm had disoriented them, causing the soldiers to become lost in the wilderness and perish in the cold. Yet, no bodies were ever found, no signs of conflict emerged, and the forests returned to silence, leaving only speculation and fear. Stories of disappearing units are not limited to the harsh winters of Eastern Europe. In North Africa, during the desert campaigns, another platoon of men disappeared under similarly mysterious circumstances. Tasked with holding a strategic position against enemy reconnaissance forces, the soldiers communicated regularly with their command post, providing updates on the desert's harsh terrain, water shortages, and enemy movements. Then, in a single day, all contact ceased. Search parties traversed hundreds of miles of desert, encountering only the footprints of their initial patrol, which abruptly stopped in the sand. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of capture, no indication of what could have happened. Some theories suggested they had been caught in a sudden sandstorm and buried by shifting dunes. Others imagined the unlikely scenario of enemy capture followed by secret execution. Still, decades later, the fate of that platoon remains a mystery. The psychological toll of disappearing units on surviving soldiers and families was immense. Commanders were haunted by the unknown, unable to provide closure or explanation. Families of the missing waited endlessly for news, sometimes clinging to hope, sometimes consumed by grief. Letters sent to the last known addresses of soldiers became silent memorials, read over and over by relatives desperate for answers. In some cases, soldiers' personal effects arrived years later, discovered by accident, offering fragments of information, yet deepening the enigma. Disappearing platoons were often elite units, chosen for their skills, discipline, and reliability. These were not haphazard groups, but carefully selected teams capable of executing complex missions in hostile territory. This made their vanishing even more puzzling. For example, a reconnaissance unit in the Pacific Theater was tasked with surveying enemy-held islands. They were trained in navigation, stealth, and survival in tropical conditions, and they had completed similar missions successfully before. Yet after landing on one small island, radio contact ceased abruptly. Search and rescue teams scoured the area, combing beaches, jungles, and caves, but found nothing. No trace of the men, no wreckage of their equipment, no evidence of a firefight. Only the whispers of locals and scattered rumors suggested that something had happened, though no one could say what. The mystery is compounded by wartime chaos. Records were often lost, misfiled, or destroyed. Reports of missing units sometimes conflicted with battlefield reports, creating contradictions that remain unresolved to this day. In some cases, surviving enemy documents acknowledged the presence of reconnaissance parties, but provided no explanation of what happened to them. In others, reports suggested that the units might have been captured, yet prisoners' lists contained no corresponding names. The lack of closure feeds the fascination and horror surrounding these disappearances. Some historians have suggested that environmental factors contributed to the vanishing of platoons. In dense forests, deserts, swamps, and islands, it was possible for small groups to be separated and lost even in familiar terrain. Extreme weather, treacherous landscapes, and natural hazards could render entire units vulnerable. Avalanches, sandstorms, quicksand, and hidden ravines could engulf soldiers, leaving little or no trace. These explanations, while plausible, do not account for cases in which units disappeared under controlled conditions, with experienced guides and in areas previously scouted for safety. In addition to natural hazards, human factors played a role. Panic, disorientation, exhaustion, and miscommunication could cause units to fragment. Soldiers separated from their platoon often made split-second decisions that could lead them deeper into danger. Fear of enemy patrols sometimes forced soldiers to hide or take risky routes, resulting in permanent disappearance. Yet, even with these considerations, the total vanishing of well-trained, cohesive platoons continues to defy easy explanation. One of the most enduring cases involves an entire battalion assigned to patrol a remote valley in the Ardennes. Intelligence suggested that enemy forces had established a secret encampment there, and the battalion was tasked with reconnaissance. They left the base, moving confidently through the valley, sending routine updates to command. Then, mid-morning, contact ceased. Search parties found abandoned vehicles and equipment neatly arranged as if the platoon had stepped away momentarily, yet the soldiers themselves had vanished. The lack of disturbance suggested they had not been killed in combat. Some speculated they were captured, others that they walked into a hidden trap or natural hazard. Yet, despite extensive searches, decades later, their fate remains unknown. Disappearing units were not just a feature of land campaigns. Naval and air operations also saw similar phenomenon. Entire crews of ships, submarines, or aircrafts sometimes vanish without explanation. For instance, a reconnaissance squadron in the Atlantic Ocean reported their position before vanishing, leaving behind only empty seas and disturbed weather patterns. Investigations found no wreckage, no survivors, and no enemy records of engagement. These vanishings amplified the sense that, in war, some mysteries are too vast for understanding. The psychological impact extended to the men left behind, who often carried survivor guilt. Soldiers witnessing disappearances of fellow units had to continue fighting, planning, and following orders despite the constant reminder of mortality and unpredictability. Some of these men reported strange phenomena: ghostly sounds in forests, fleeting glimpses of figures in the distance, or inexplicable occurrences that seemed to suggest that the missing platoons had left some lingering presence. Whether these were hallucinations or manifestations of trauma, they reinforce the enigmatic aura surrounding disappearing units. Families of the missing often created their own narratives in the absence of closure. Letters became sacred objects, photographs treasured, and stories passed through generations. Some families received items that had belonged to the vanished soldiers years later, sometimes discovered by locals, sometimes returned through chance encounters. These fragments of the past offered glimpses into the soldiers' lives, yet only deepened the enigma. Over time, historians have attempted to catalog and analyze cases of disappearing platoons. Some attribute the phenomenon to a combination of environmental hazards, enemy action, and human error. Others propose more extraordinary explanations, including secret enemy experiments, mistaken engagement zones, or even intentional concealment to protect sensitive operations. The lack of definitive evidence ensures that